Well, let's return now to Jessica Wilson becoming Victoria's new Liberal leader today. Here she was earlier in question time, already ramping up pressure on the Premier.
Between now and the end of question time, the Labor government's debt will have increased by $2 million. Premier, is this debt increase sustainable?
We are the only state, federal or state, to be forecasting an operating surplus.
In relevance, this was a very, very direct question, and a minute into the answer, the Premier hasn't even dealt with the substance of the question.
There is no point of order. The Premier is being entirely relevant to the question that was asked of her, and I ask that you rule the point of order out of order.
Order. The Premier was being relevant to the question. Premier, to continue.
Well, I'm joined now live by Federal Shadow Finance Minister James Paterson, who's been a long-standing friend of Jess Wilson. Good to see you again, James. Look, critics today have said that Brad Batten was cutting through on crime and that he even had Jacinta Allen on the back foot. So why make this change now?
Well, Sharri, Brad Batten is a good man, he's a good Victorian, he's a good Liberal, and on his worst professional day in his life, he behaved with real class and real dignity today, and I want to pay tribute to him for that, and for the good job that he's done in holding this government to account on their appalling crime crisis that's made Victorians feel unsafe in their homes. But the State Parliamentary Party, who know their colleagues best, felt that a change was necessary to make sure that the Victorian Liberals can compete and win at the next state election. Because if they lost the next state election, that would mean 16 years of Labor, 16 years of Daniel Andrews and Jacinta Allen. Victoria's a great state, but it's suffered deeply under this government, and I really worry what would be left of it if that happened.
James, some point to Freshwater polling that says Brad Batten was ahead. They point to that polling as a reason not to switch leaders now. But do you trust this polling? Because the same company, Freshwater, also had Peter Dutton ahead when he, as we know, suffered one of the most crushing Liberal defeats in history.
Well, Sharri, I think everybody knows about the deficiencies of the polling that was done for the Federal Liberal Party at the last election, and all polling should be taken with a grain of salt. No pollster is perfect, and we should treat it as a snapshot in time and consider the broader research picture, not just any one poll on any one day. More important than that, though, are the economic statistics facing Australia and Victoria in particular. Victoria will rack up $200 billion of debt on Jacinta Allen's watch. Businesses are fleeing, investment is fleeing, people are fleeing, and young Victorians have lost hope for their future in Victoria, and we need to restore that sense of hope, and I think Jess Wilson is the right person to do that. I think as a young person, as someone with a really strong economic policy background, she's the person who can turn the state around, she's the person who can turn the state budget around, and she's the person who can give us the best shot of winning the next election.
She's clearly very impressive, very smart, very confident and articulate. She is young though, 35. This is her first term in Parliament. Do you think she has enough experience politically, even in campaigning, to win at the next election, given how well-oiled the Labor machine is?
Well, Sharri, I was first elected to Parliament when I was 28 and I'm still only 37, so I'm certainly not going to criticise other young people for putting up their hand. And I don't think Jess is an ordinary politician. I think she's a rare political talent, and that's reflected in the fact that her colleagues have elected her unanimously to lead the Victorian Liberal Party today. They didn't do that lightly. They did it because they know her well, because they trust her, because they have confidence in her, and they know she's the best chance to save Victoria from 16 years of Labor and the terrible economic disaster that would entail.
All right, just moving on to some other topics in your own portfolio area of finance. This was just quite shocking comments from the Commonwealth Bank's Chief Executive, Matt Coman, today. He says there won't be any rate cuts. This is in his opinion. There won't be any interest rate cuts in the foreseeable future. And he says none in 2026. He's blaming higher than expected inflation. Have a look.
To answer your question directly, no, I don't think a reduction in the cash rate is likely in 2026.
I mean, James, that is quite confronting for homeowners to hear that.
It's terribly discouraging news to have one of our major banks predict no more interest rate relief, at least for the next year. But unfortunately, I think Matt Comyn knows what he's talking about, and the Reserve Bank Governor, Michelle Bullock, has said similar things. This is Jim Chalmers' responsibility. He took responsibility when interest rates were coming down and when inflation was coming down, but now inflation is rising again and it looks like interest rates are not going to come down. He should take responsibility for that, because the average mortgage holder is about $20,000 worse off every year under Labor because of the rate rises that have happened on their watch. And many of them were looking forward to a lot more interest rate relief than they might now actually have.
We've seen today Turkey blast Australia's bid to host the COP31-32 climate in Australia. Now, Chris Bowen slams this. He says Australia is determined to win the bid. But one of the issues with this, James, is that this could cost taxpayers between $1 and $2 billion. We don't know exactly how much because we have seen no transparency over the cost. Have a look at this.
I'm not going to comment on, the costs of a conference that we haven't won the bid for yet.
Commentary is commentary. People plucking figures, from who?
Should there be more transparency over, such an exorbitant cost to host a climate conference?
Sharri, we had a $12 billion deficit last financial year. We're forecast to have a $42 billion deficit this financial year. $2 billion on a climate conference would be an obscene waste of Australian taxpayers' money. Think about all the other things that could be done with that. Think about the schools and hospitals and police stations that could be paid for with that money. Frankly, if Turkey doesn't withdraw their bid and this ends up going back to the German city of Bonn instead, then Jim Chalmers and Katy Gallagher should write a letter of thank you to the Turkish government and President Erdogan for saving Australian taxpayers $2 billion.
Just what about the broader point of Australia pitching for this conference when it seems like we are actually out of step now with many parts of the world? Tony Blair and Bill Gates have changed their tune. The US has withdrawn from Paris. Do you think we should still be part of these conferences?
Well, I've got no problem going to these conferences and representing our national interest there, but I don't see the merit in hosting it in Australia, particularly at such great expense. Keir Starmer, I think, put it best at the current COP conference in Brazil last week, where he said the global consensus for emissions reduction has broken down in the last few years, and we are not on track to come anywhere near close to achieving net zero by 2050 globally, nor in Australia. The only way to achieve that would be to do huge damage to our economy. Australia's actually reduced our emissions far more than the developed world. We've reduced them by 28% over the last 20 years, compared to just 16% in the OECD, the world's advanced economies. So we're doing our fair share. We should continue to do our fair share, but not at the cost of affordable, reliable energy for Australians.
Just finally, we saw front page news yesterday, both first in the Daily Mail, then in the Australian, that there are a small number of moderates who are saying they'd be prepared to support Andrew Hastie as leader of the party. Some have even suggested a Tim Wilson, Andrew Hastie ticket where Wilson would be the deputy. Is this being mooted?
I don't know. No colleague has raised that with me or proposed that to me. I support Susan Lee as our leader, and I'm working hard to make her leadership a success, because I think it's in the Liberal Party's interest that she succeed. I think it's in the Liberal Party's interest that she and Dan Tehan are given the opportunity to prosecute what is now a very strong contrast with the government's disastrous failure on energy policy and our strong position of dumping net zero. This is a government that's presided over a 40% increase in electricity bills and a 40% increase in gas bills for households. We can't keep going on like this, but the Liberal Party has the answers to those problems. And I think Susan and Dan and the team need to be given the opportunity to sell that message.
Right, James Paterson, really appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you so much.